April 1944. A line of weary German prisoners shuffled through the gates of a U.S. Army POW camp in North Africa. The desert wind carried the smell of oil, metal, and dust. They expected barbed wire, filth, and shouting guards. Instead, they heard the steady hum of engines and the rhythmic clatter of machinery. Inside, rows of tents stood in perfect order. Soldiers in clean uniforms moved with quiet precision. Steam rose from a long shed where laundry units worked non-stop. Buckets of soapy water gleamed in the sunlight. Nearby, other prisoners exited a shower tent, clean-shaven, wearing freshly washed fatigues. One German sergeant stopped walking. He stared at the floorboards beneath his boots, clean, swept, almost polished. "This can't be war," he muttered. Around him, others whispered the same. They had fought an army they thought was crude but numerous. What they saw instead was a machine built on discipline, efficiency, and hygiene. A war fought not only with bullets, but with order. The story of America's invisible weapon had just begun. Before the first shot was fired in North Africa, the United States Army faced a question few other militaries even considered. How do you keep millions of men clean, healthy, and ready for war? When America entered World War II in December 1941, its military was massive in manpower, but green in experience. The European and Pacific fronts would stretch supply lines across oceans. Disease, infection, and exhaustion threatened to kill more soldiers than bullets. U.S. planners remembered the lessons of World War I, when poor sanitation had caused outbreaks that crippled divisions. This time, they vowed it would be different. The task fell to the Quartermaster Corps, the invisible force behind the frontline fighters. Their mission was clear: keep the Army fed, clothed, and clean, no matter where it fought. From 1942 onward, the quartermasters designed a mobile civilization that could move with the troops, complete with bakeries, water purification units, laundry trucks, and field showers. By 1943, these systems had become the backbone of the U.S. war effort. In the North African desert, engineers set up mobile water points that could purify thousands of gallons a day. Laundry units, mounted on six-wheel trucks, washed and sterilized hundreds of uniforms daily, using diesel-powered drums. Shower stations used water heating trailers and recycled runoff. Every battalion was trained to maintain hygiene standards. Every soldier was briefed on the importance of clean hands, boiled water, and disinfected clothes. It wasn't about comfort. It was about survival. Lice carried typhus. Filthy uniforms spread disease. Dirty kitchens invited flies and infection. The Americans treated sanitation like strategy. Meanwhile, German soldiers lived under an entirely different system. Their army valued endurance and field toughness, not comfort. Hygiene was often secondary to mobility and aggression. German field laundries existed, but they were limited in number and usually assigned to rear areas. Soldiers at the front went weeks without bathing, often sleeping in the same uniforms they'd worn since deployment. In Africa, the difference became obvious. American troops looked cleaner, healthier, more alert. German troops, hardened but unwashed, carried lice, infections, and the stink of exhaustion. Prisoners captured after the battles of Kasserine and Tunisia later wrote about the shock they felt entering American facilities. The floors were swept, the food was hot, the toilets worked. And the laundry? It smelled like soap, something most of them hadn't experienced in months. For the Americans, these systems weren't luxuries. They were proof that war could be fought with order. For the Germans, they revealed something deeper, that America's strength came from precision, not chaos. But the story didn't end in Africa. What began in the desert soon moved across Europe. As the Allies advanced, their logistical machine grew stronger. New portable laundry and bath units could serve entire divisions in rotation. Sanitation officers tracked waste disposal and water safety with military accuracy. Cleanliness became a visible mark of American power. And by the time the first German prisoners entered the camps in France and later the United States, they were walking into the full maturity of that system, one that stunned even the most disciplined Wehrmacht veterans. The efficiency they witnessed was not an accident. It was the result of planning that began long before they surrendered. By mid-1944, the U.S. Army's sanitation network had become one of the most organized systems in military history. Every division-sized unit had mobile bath and laundry companies attached. Each could wash and disinfect thousands of uniforms a week. Every soldier was scheduled for showers at least once every 10 days, even in combat zones. It was discipline, not luxury. These systems worked like assembly lines. Water trucks arrived first, followed by heating trailers and laundry drums. Engineers set up canvas tents for showers, drainage trenches, and drying racks. Within hours, an empty field became a functioning hygiene station. Dirty uniforms went in, sterilized ones came out. Soapy steam rose into the air like factory smoke. In contrast, German forces struggled with logistics. Their field laundries were centralized and often destroyed by Allied airstrikes. Soap was scarce. Fuel shortages crippled machinery. On the Eastern Front, temperatures froze water supplies solid. By 1943, German divisions suffered massive outbreaks of lice and skin disease. The Wehrmacht issued hygiene pamphlets, but implementation was uneven. Cleanliness depended on the unit, the weather, and sheer luck. U.S. commanders knew the difference wasn't just physical, it was psychological. A clean soldier felt human. He slept better, ate better, and obeyed orders better. It was about morale. Studies conducted by U.S. Army medical branches showed that troops with regular access to showers and clean uniforms had fewer cases of dysentery, trench foot, and fatigue. Hygiene was a combat multiplier. When Germany began losing ground in Europe, its soldiers started encountering American supply routes firsthand. Convoys of trucks carrying water, soap, fuel, and rations moved with clockwork precision. German officers captured during the Normandy campaign wrote in disbelief about the comfort infrastructure behind U.S. lines. Everything had a place, and everything worked. Even waste disposal was planned. At American POW camps, these systems operated on the same logic. Efficiency and order came first. Each camp had its own laundry and sanitation crews, often staffed by the prisoners themselves under U.S. supervision. Every prisoner received access to showers, medical checkups, and clean clothing. It wasn't charity, it was policy. The Geneva Convention required humane treatment, but the Americans went further. They believed that discipline began with environment. A clean camp stayed calm. Disease outbreaks were rare. Violence was lower. Guards respected order, and prisoners mirrored it. For many German prisoners, this was their first exposure to industrial-scale hygiene. Some described it as humiliatingly impressive. They had come from a culture that prided itself on engineering and order, yet here they saw those ideals perfected by their enemy. One POW later recalled, "They treated cleanliness as if it were religion." Inside those camps, the sound of washing machines replaced the sound of gunfire. Soap, not ammunition, became the symbol of control. Prisoners who had fought in mud and blood now stood in line for hot water and clean towels. It felt unreal, but this shock carried meaning beyond comfort. It reflected the deeper machinery that had powered America's rise during the war, an economy and logistics network that could produce cleanliness at scale, even in the chaos of global conflict. Every washed uniform, every sterilized pot, every disinfected barrack spoke of a nation that fought with organization. To the Germans, who had learned to endure hardship as a sign of strength, this was a different kind of power, one built on efficiency and discipline rather than brute endurance. The war, they realized, wasn't just fought with guns and tanks. It was fought with systems, procedures, and habits that turned chaos into order. Soon, these systems would become the stage where the two sides met, face to face. The moment German prisoners stepped into U.S. captivity, The contrast between two worlds became undeniable. The first angle is human. The reactions of German prisoners were often unfiltered and immediate. Men who had survived months in the mud and heat of North Africa or the freezing fields of Europe were struck silent by what they saw. They described neatly folded uniforms stacked like bricks, showers with hot water on demand, and clean, orderly barracks. Many later admitted that they had never associated war with such precision and care. It was confusing and, for some, unsettling. The idea that an enemy could combine brutality with such meticulous hygiene challenged their assumptions about combat. Some prisoners attempted to emulate the system when back in German camps. They folded clothes, washed more frequently, and adopted small personal routines they had observed. Diaries and letters reveal astonishment, sometimes admiration. A lieutenant stationed near a U.S. camp in 1944 wrote, "We fought them in the desert and thought ourselves prepared. Yet here they are, washing, cleaning, and maintaining order with the precision of engineers." The second angle is tactical and organizational. The U.S. Army understood that a clean soldier was a ready soldier. Uniforms free of lice and mud reduced disease outbreaks, which in turn minimized manpower loss. Clean camps reduced friction between soldiers and officers. Supply lines that included water, soap, and laundry units were considered just as essential as ammunition and rations. Commanders planned hygiene stations along advance routes, allowing troops to rest, recover, and remain operationally effective. Even minor lapses could have major consequences. In North Africa, poor hygiene in one battalion once led to a localized dysentery outbreak that sidelined nearly 200 men. After that, field hygiene regulations were enforced strictly. Latrines were dug according to specifications, water was boiled or filtered, and laundry trucks became as familiar as supply convoys. The third angle is technological. The U.S. Army deployed portable washing units that were engineering marvels for their time. Diesel-powered drums could wash and dry hundreds of uniforms daily. Water purification trucks ensured that troops had safe drinking water, even in desert or flood conditions. Delousing chambers eliminated lice in minutes. These machines were compact, mobile, and reliable, able to move alongside frontline troops or operate in stationary camps. Their existence illustrates a broader philosophy. Logistical technology could be just as decisive as tanks or artillery. The fourth angle is moral and psychological. Cleanliness represented control and civilization. Prisoners who observed the U.S. system often remarked on the dignity it provided. Even in captivity, they were treated in accordance with international law, and the environment itself reinforced a sense of order. For American soldiers, enforcing hygiene standards was a form of discipline and pride. It reminded them that their military identity extended beyond combat. It was about efficiency, morale, and maintaining the human spirit under extreme conditions. The final angle, bridging all others, is cultural. For Germans, cleanliness had practical but limited importance in the field. For Americans, it was a principle embedded in the military ethos. It showed the contrast between endurance and organization, improvisation and planning. Observing it firsthand, prisoners began to understand that the American approach to war was comprehensive. They fought battles, managed health, and maintained morale in a systematized way that left nothing to chance. These perspectives intersected in the camps and battle zones. German soldiers were both amazed and perplexed. The Americans were prepared for hygiene to be a weapon of war, though it was invisible, silent, and often unnoticed by the untrained eye. Continuing the analysis, the fifth angle focuses on leadership. U.S. officers enforced sanitation policies with the same rigor as combat orders. Colonels, captains, and sergeants inspected camps regularly, ensuring that showers were functional, laundry schedules maintained, and latrines clean. Field reports frequently highlighted hygiene as a critical readiness metric. Commanders recognized that a soldier who fought in filth or squalor was not just uncomfortable, but more likely to fall sick, disobey orders, or underperform in combat. This attention to detail filtered down the chain of command. Every unit, from a platoon to a division, understood that maintaining cleanliness was a responsibility, not a suggestion. The sixth angle examines the enemy perspective. German POWs often compared the U.S. system to their own, noting the stark differences. Many were trained to endure hardship, but they were unprepared for the efficiency and scale of American sanitation. Letters and memoirs describe a sense of disbelief. Soldiers used to rigid discipline and precision in combat now encountered similar rigor applied to washing clothes and cleaning facilities. The contrast was disarming. Some Germans acknowledged that the organization, rather than brute strength, was a key element of U.S. military success. Others felt frustration at being unable to replicate such systems under their own command, highlighting the interplay between culture and capability. The seventh angle is medical and scientific. The Americans collected extensive data on disease, infection, and hygiene-related casualties. Field hospitals and medical units tracked outbreaks of dysentery, trench foot, and lice-borne illnesses, analyzing correlations with bathing frequency and uniform cleanliness. These records informed policy decisions. Water filtration units were prioritized, portable showers became mandatory, and laundry units were deployed near active front lines. The result was a dramatic reduction in preventable illness. Soldiers remained combat-ready, and camps operated with fewer interruptions. The medical data underscored a simple truth. Hygiene saved lives, and in war, every life counted. The eighth angle centers on logistics and operational strategy. Sanitation systems were not static. They moved with armies. Routes were mapped to ensure water and laundry services reached all units. Supply convoys included fuel for washing units and tents designed for quick setup. Engineers prepared blueprints for mobile facilities, anticipating terrain, weather, and enemy action. These systems were as carefully planned as artillery barrages or supply drops. The Americans understood that war was won not only on the battlefield, but also in the meticulous orchestration of resources behind the lines. Through these angles, a pattern emerges. Hygiene was a tool of power, not a mere convenience. It was human, technological, tactical, moral, medical, and logistical. It shaped the perception of the enemy and reinforced the discipline of the troops. German prisoners recognized it, Americans relied on it, and its effects rippled across every level of the conflict. The convergence of these perspectives led to a defining moment. When prisoners first encountered the full scale of U.S. sanitation systems, the invisible machinery of war revealed itself. It was no longer an abstract policy or a rear echelon detail. It became tangible, immersive, and unforgettable. September 1944. German prisoners arrived at a U.S. Army POW camp near Normandy, freshly captured in the aftermath of the Allied push inland. They were tired, hungry, and wary, expecting the chaos and filth of battlefield captivity. Instead, the camp stretched before them in precise order, tents lined neatly along gravel pathways, latrines positioned at measured intervals, wash stations hissing with hot water. Steam drifted into the cool morning air. One group of prisoners was led to the laundry facility. Rows of uniforms spun in diesel-powered drums, sheets hung on lines, and stacks of freshly pressed clothing awaited distribution. A German corporal stopped and stared. "Everything is clean," he whispered. His comrades murmured in agreement, their skepticism giving way to awe. They had fought months in mud, dust, and heat. They had seen men sickened by lice and dysentery. Now, they saw a system where disease seemed impossible. Nearby, other prisoners entered shower tents. Hot water flowed, towels were provided, and guards supervised respectfully rather than harshly. Each prisoner followed a schedule. Medical personnel checked for infection, administered vaccines, and ensured proper hygiene. No detail was overlooked. German soldiers, trained to expect hardship, found the experience almost disorienting. Letters and reports from camp officers capture these reactions. One entry notes, "Prisoners pause at the sight of washing units. Some hesitate before entering the showers. Many comment on the regularity and cleanliness. They have never seen such order." Another officer observed, "The men whisper among themselves, amazed that an army can fight effectively while remaining so disciplined in hygiene." The camp's kitchens reflected the same precision. Food was cooked, portioned, and served under sanitary conditions. Mess halls were organized. Utensils and trays washed constantly. Even the handling of waste demonstrated planning. Refuse was collected systematically, and drainage systems kept living areas dry. For the prisoners, it was a revelation. They had endured months where food and water safety were uncertain. Here, the environment itself conveyed security and control. This was not incidental. It was the culmination of years of planning, investment, and foresight. The U.S. Army understood that the efficiency of these systems had tangible effects on morale and readiness. Soldiers returned to duty healthier, more alert, and more disciplined. Prisoners, conversely, could not ignore the contrast to their own suffering. The moment crystallized a profound realization among the German POWs. American victory depended not only on weapons and strategy, but on an invisible infrastructure that maintained the human body and mind under extreme conditions. The laundry and sanitation systems became symbols of a larger truth. War is as much about preparation and order as it is about combat. As the prisoners moved through the camp, this realization deepened. Each step reinforced the contrast between endurance and efficiency, improvisation and planning. For many, it was humbling. They saw a disciplined force that could sustain itself in any environment, leaving no element to chance. These experiences would echo in post-war reflections. POWs, officers, and historians alike noted that encounters with American camps changed their understanding of military power. The invisible machinery of hygiene, often overlooked in traditional narratives, now stood at the center of a pivotal lesson in warfare. As days passed, the German prisoners' exposure to the U.S. system deepened. They were assigned to help in the camp under supervision, folding laundry, maintaining latrines, and assisting in kitchens. At first, many resisted, expecting harsh treatment or chaotic orders. Instead, they found clarity and procedure. Every task had a method. Every machine had instructions. Every corner of the camp followed a schedule. One lieutenant wrote in his diary, "I have been in war for 3 years, yet I have never seen men instructed so methodically to maintain cleanliness. It is almost offensive in its perfection, and yet undeniably effective." Others remarked that even the smallest details, soap distribution, towel rotation, or the placement of washing lines, reflected planning that surpassed their imagination. Medical inspections reinforced this effect. Prisoners were routinely checked for lice, wounds, and infections. Those who required treatment received immediate care. Officers noted that morale improved when prisoners realized that health and hygiene were prioritized, even for captives. The Germans were forced to confront an unfamiliar concept. The enemy treated human life, even their enemies, with structured care and attention. Letters sent back to Germany, smuggled or later published in memoirs, consistently mentioned the same astonishment. One soldier wrote, "The Americans fight a war with bullets, yes, but they also fight it with cleanliness. I have seen men transformed by showers and clean clothes. I have felt shame for what we lacked." Another recalled being assigned to fold freshly laundered shirts and thinking, "Our generals would laugh at this." Here, it is taken seriously. Beyond individual reactions, the camp itself was a demonstration of operational foresight. Engineers had ensured that laundry trucks could process 500–700 uniforms daily. Hot water boilers were fueled continuously. Waste disposal channels were maintained so efficiently that stagnant water never accumulated. Even in temporary encampments, these systems could be set up in hours. German prisoners could not ignore the scale and organization. The psychological impact became evident. Soldiers who had been hardened by combat were humbled by the efficiency. The camp, a place meant to hold them powerless, instead became a mirror, reflecting the systematic excellence of the U.S. Army. Discipline, they realized, was not merely obedience to orders, but a network of coordinated systems that sustained life, health, and morale. Some POWs began to adopt American methods quietly. They washed themselves more regularly, arranged their personal items neatly, and followed routines they had previously dismissed as trivial. For many, the revelation was profound. Attention to detail, even in something as mundane as laundry, could define the strength of an army. The climax of this lesson came during an inspection by U.S. officers. German prisoners watched rows of laundry machines, men washing in an orderly sequence, kitchens functioning without delay, medical tents inspecting each individual. Officers noted the prisoners' astonishment. Many stand with mouths open. Some smile, others shake their heads. It is clear that the operation has left a lasting impression. This turning point underscored a simple but powerful fact. Logistical efficiency, hygiene, and order were as decisive as firepower in modern warfare. The prisoners' respect, surprise, and sometimes envy illustrated a broader reality. The U.S. Army had mastered not only combat, but the human environment of war, sustaining soldiers, preventing disease, and maintaining morale under pressure. By the end of their initial weeks, German soldiers had internalized this lesson. The invisible machinery of the U.S. Army had imposed itself upon them as effectively as any frontline encounter. Laundry, showers, and sanitation were not minor details. They were instruments of strategy, reflection of discipline, and proof of a military culture that valued precision and foresight. From the hum of the washing machines to the steaming showers and perfectly stacked uniforms, the prisoners saw a truth that would linger long after liberation. Victory depended not only on weapons and tactics, but on the quiet, persistent work of keeping men alive, healthy, and orderly. The experience of German prisoners in U.S. POW camps left lasting impressions that extended well beyond the duration of their captivity. Once initial astonishment faded, the broader implications became clear. American military leaders had not only provided for basic necessities, they had demonstrated a system capable of sustaining large forces in prolonged operations. Hygiene, organization, and efficiency were no longer abstract concepts. They were tangible, operational advantages. Reports from the camps documented that prisoners experienced fewer illnesses than in other captivity systems. Dysentery, typhus, and lice outbreaks, which plagued German camps, were rare. The Quartermaster Corps had anticipated potential weaknesses and addressed them with precision. For prisoners, this was a revelation. The system not only served the captives, but also reinforced the resilience of the army itself. Clean soldiers were healthy soldiers, and healthy soldiers maintained order and morale. The impact on the prisoners' morale was complex. Some were humbled by the contrast between their own experiences and the efficiency they observed. Others were inspired to replicate certain habits when they returned home. Diaries and memoirs from former POWs frequently describe adopting personal hygiene routines, washing clothing more diligently, and organizing living spaces meticulously, practices that had seemed trivial in the war's chaos, but now revealed their strategic value. American soldiers, too, benefited indirectly. The maintenance of a clean and orderly environment reduced disciplinary problems, increased efficiency, and lowered the psychological stress associated with prolonged warfare. Officers noted that soldiers with access to regular bathing, clean uniforms, and sanitary facilities exhibited higher morale and combat readiness. This indirectly affected prisoner treatment. Well organized, disciplined troops required fewer resources to manage captives, and could enforce standards without resorting to harsh measures. The medical consequences were equally significant. Epidemiological records from the camps indicate that hygiene protocols dramatically reduced infection rates. POWs had access to hot showers, disinfected clothing, and clean bedding, resources that dramatically lowered the risk of communicable diseases. From a strategic perspective, this meant fewer medical evacuations and a more reliable labor force for camp operations. American commanders understood that maintaining these systems was as critical to success as securing artillery or supply lines. The contrast with German facilities amplified the effect. German soldiers returning home, whether from the front lines or captivity, carried stories of American efficiency. This shaped post-war perceptions of military organization. POWs described the U.S. Army as disciplined yet humane, efficient yet thorough. Hygiene was framed not merely as a comfort, but as a visible demonstration of systemic superiority. Education and reflection played a role in shaping these perceptions. Officers encouraged prisoners to follow routines, maintain cleanliness, and adhere to schedules. These structured activities occupied time, reduced idleness, and instilled a sense of order in an otherwise disempowering environment. The emphasis on routine helped prisoners cope with captivity and facilitated smoother interactions between guards and captives. The influence of these practices extended beyond the immediate context of the camps. Former POWs later reported using lessons learned in hygiene, order, and personal organization in civilian life. The systematic approach to cleanliness impressed upon them the importance of procedure and discipline, creating ripple effects that outlasted the war. Even within the U.S. military, the effectiveness of sanitation and logistical systems reinforced broader strategies. Commanders could rely on predictable, functional environments for both soldiers and prisoners. This reliability allowed forces to concentrate on offensive operations, confident that the infrastructure behind them maintained health, morale, and readiness. The lasting legacy of the camps was also documented in post-war studies. Historians and military analysts noted that the combination of hygiene, efficiency, and prisoner treatment contributed to America's reputation as a disciplined and humane occupying force. It highlighted a key lesson. Victory in modern warfare required mastery over the human environment, not just mastery of the battlefield. This intersection of logistics, hygiene, and morale created a turning point in how both sides evaluated military strength. German prisoners, initially skeptical and at times dismissive, eventually recognized the strategic and cultural significance of the U.S. Army's systems. Their observations reinforced the idea that true military power extends beyond weapons and tactics. It resides in the ability to sustain men physically and mentally under extreme conditions.